What's up, YouTube? Today I want to talk about a concept that I call produce to mix. So I want to talk about a couple of basic concepts and how to utilize them to make your life much easier when it comes to mixing your tracks. So the basic idea behind it is you can save yourself a lot of pain and woes in the mixing process by just thoughtfully writing and producing your tracks. So let's get into the video. So first and foremost, I want to discuss the idea of orchestra layout. As you can see here, there's a picture of a kind of standard orchestra layout. There are various different standards that they use, and as you may notice, there's particular reasons why they place the instruments where they do. Stuff like the violins, which are like the main melodic instruments, and like the strings, which are, going to be creating the pad type sounds, are arranged in a very kind of stereo-like manner. You've got the kind of high frequency string sounds right up at the front here. And as you move back, you get the more full range or more bassy sounds. The most bassy or full range sounds are along the back here. Stuff like the double bass strings, stuff like the pianos, the drums, and that kind of stuff. And the reason they do this is because of a thing called the proximity effect. So if we have a look at this graph here, this is basically a quick idea of what the proximity effect is. Essentially, the idea is as you get closer to a sound source, you perceive more bass when you hear that sound source. So their idea when they're laying out these orchestras is to kind of EQ these sounds just by placing them in the room. And now if we jump back to this image, you'll notice, for example, stuff like the bass drums and the bassy instruments like the oboes and, the really bassy stuff is all along the back here to create a kind of EQ effect by just laying out the different instruments. And again, going back to like what I said, the spread in terms of the stereo field is also very, very important. So why does all of this matter? In a time before we had stuff like EQs and mixers to mix the volume of hundreds of different sound sources, the concept of mixing sound sources was still there. The conductors that were creating these orchestras were laying out their instruments in a very, very meticulous fashion to get the best sound out of each sound source. So now back to the main concept of the video, produce to mix. Basically, what I'm trying to get at is if you just thoughtfully fill your frequency spectrum and thoughtfully fill your stereo spectrum when you're producing the tracks, it's going to be so much easier to mix your tracks because they're going to naturally sound good. The mix that you create while you're producing the track is most probably going to be close to what you want as the final result. In this example, I've just got a kick and bass and like a percussion stinger, like a hit at the beginning of the bar. And what I want to do is I want to start putting in some synths and stuff like that. And I want to start discussing the idea that I want to get across in this video about, if you just thoughtfully create these sounds and, thoughtfully place them, you're most likely not going to have to do too much work later on in the mix. So this is what I've got so far. So I personally don't like to fill this space over here too much. I find if you start adding too much stuff in that sort of area, the clarity of your low end starts to get depleted a little bit. And you'll notice that it's something that's quite apparent across trance and EDM in general, is a bit of a scoop in the low mids like this. You'll notice, for example, my kick and bass was kind of filling up this spectrum here of this green. I believe that's from an Asterix track. I can't remember which one now. But now the idea that I want to get across is let's start adding in some synth sounds and some, other sound effects and stuff like that, but placing them within their own space in the spectrum and within their own space in the stereo field. So for this, I'm probably just going to end up using a bunch of presets and stuff, but I just want to show you, like I said, I just want to kind of get across the power of thoughtfully placing your sounds and stuff. So let's start from the kind of bottom and work our way upwards. Let's find a mid-range sound. I've already got something in mind. When you create your own banks of presets, what often happens is like when you're creating a sound, or when you're creating a track, you kind of have a vision in mind of a sound that you want to fit in a specific space. And if you've already made that sound and you've saved it, you can quickly, recall that sound and put it wherever you need. So let's find a kind of mid-rangey sound and start placing this in the track. So I believe this track is in F sharp. So let's add some interest to the sound. I want to put maybe like a bandpass filter on here. I want to use this one. Let's put on some delay on here as well. We can just put some simple EQ afterwards, which we'll get to shortly. So let's just slap bandpass on here. Let's go with a 4-pole. Maybe a 2-pole sounds better. Let's jump into this delay, turn the saturation down a little bit, give it some stereo like this. Okay, so here I just want to do some light EQ. Let's just create, do like a cut here in the lows and maybe some high cut as well, just to give us some space to lay in some other sounds, but we won't do as steep a cut. So let's just render that out. And start looking at a couple of other examples. I actually want to use phase plant again, so let's just boom, initialize that, remove some of these effects here. I want to add in my Goa gated vocal patch. I've also done this in a tutorial, and also want to put in an instance of Hive. And let's just, I'm actually just going to look through the presets here for a pad sound. Cool. This should be a nice array of sounds to use. So here, I've got one that sounds nice, really, really deep and stereo effect. Here, let's put another filter here, but I want to use a different style of filter. I don't want to use a band pass, I want to use a high pass. So that's a nice way of getting that, like, still having that kind of like deep sound, but without getting too much of that low frequency through. So then the idea is, while you're placing these sounds, is to audition it while you've got something like a frequency spectrum in, and see where placing those sounds fits into that kind of spectrum, and try fill it up by just the placement of different sounds, without having to obviously dive into EQ and stuff too much. Obviously there are cases like where you want that like low paddy sound. So the very, very high frequencies here, I'll generally save for like the percussions and stuff like that, which I'm going to get into now. But let's just have a look at using stereo placement to get a bit more clarity out of each of these elements. So this sound here, that's obviously, I think, our kind of most stereo wide sound. I mean, you could use any kind of stereo wideness plugin here. I'm just going to use the kilohertz stereo just because it's nice and easy to understand. So this kilohertz stereo plugin is dead simple. It's literally just got like a mid and a width, and you can use the mid to obviously remove the mid channel and the width to spread it out a little bit. So I like to use this on these kind of like pad channels and just adjust them ever so slightly. So for example, the one I'll have like quite high width, low mid. The other one will be like, we'll still have some mid, and maybe like a little bit less width. So it might just need like a bit of volume adjustment here to sit like snugly into this curve, but you don't have to follow this exactly. I mean, not every track is going to be exactly the same as this, you know what I mean? So just take a couple of references and use this as a kind of loose idea before getting into the like nitty gritty of the mix. Cool, that's about it. That's about everything I wanted to get through in this video. I hope that was helpful for you guys. Let me know what you think in the comments. A big thanks to IDM Mag, proud supporters of the dance music scene and my channel. Yeah, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. See you guys next time.